some folks just spend so long researching and this and that, and like, just do it.
Come on.
You know, if I would have waited around and did all this research of what's the perfect strategy for a new housing organization and how does that fit into the whole ecosystem, like, I don't know, I was like, let's just try to do like 10 houses to start, and like, let's just do it this way. And is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. Are we going to make mistakes? Absolutely. But like, just do it, just get started. And I don't think enough people do that.
Well, hey, leader, and welcome to episode number 296 of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host, and in today's episode is brought to you by my friends at Beartongue Advisors. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope that you'll enjoy our content and become a subscriber. And if you've been with us for a while, make sure that you're subscribed, and it would mean the world to me if you would leave us a rating and review on whatever app you listen to this through. That really does help us to grow our audience and reach more leaders, so thank you in advance for that. Well, in today's episode, you'll hear my conversation with Brett Hagler. If you're unfamiliar with Brett, let me just tell you a little bit about him. Brett is the CEO and co-founder of New Story, an innovative nonprofit founded in 2015 that pioneers solutions to end global homelessness. Brett's a Y Combinator alum, a 2016 Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur, author, speaker, and cancer survivor. Fast Company recognized New Story as one of the world's most innovative companies in 2017, and in 2019 as a top 10 nonprofit. And Brett was named as one of the top 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs by Goldman Sachs in 2018. And in our conversation today, you'll hear Brett share the story of New Story. You'll hear him share about why he's so passionate about ending homelessness and what he's actually doing about it. And you'll learn the lessons that he's learned in leadership while scaling his nonprofit. But before we get into the episode, just a few announcements. This episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast is sponsored by Beartongue Advisors. The financial advisors at Beartongue Advisors help educate and empower clients to make informed financial decisions. You can find out how Beartongue Advisors can help you develop a customized financial plan for your financial future by visiting their website at beartongueadvisors.com. That's BERATUNG advisors.com. Securities and investment products and services offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Beartongue Advisors, LPL Financial, and L3 Leadership are separate entities. I also want to thank our sponsor, Henny Jewelers. They're a jeweler owned by my friend and mentor, John Henny, and my wife, Laura, and I got our engagement and wedding rings through Henny Jewelers, and we just loved our experience. Not only do they have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. In fact, they give every couple that comes in engaged a book to help them prepare for their marriage, and we just love that. So if you're in need of a good jeweler, check out hennyjewelers.com. And with all that being said, let's dive right into the episode. Here's my conversation with Brett Hagler. Well, Brett, thank you so much for being willing to do this interview. And why don't we just start off with you just telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, it's great to be here with everybody. I lead an organization called New Story. Our mission is to pioneer solutions to end global homelessness. We've been at it for about 6 years now, and we try to work with families that are coming from inadequate housing, usually living just with tarp tents or piece together homes that they self-build themselves. And we come in and partner with them and try to design better housing. And that usually shows up in the form of a larger community with a couple hundred homes. And then we're also trying to, and in that we're designing the communities very intentionally with the family's input, and then also, trying to bring a better process and an innovation to financing and how families think about getting access to financing and improving their creditworthiness, which they have not really had an opportunity for before. And then and also just on the architecture and the home design side of trying to lower cost of housing. So we work with a market that unfortunately there's about 1.6 billion people in the world that don't have adequate housing, and we focus our market on families making usually between like $3 to $10 a day is our market. Wow. So that's what we do. We work right now in Haiti, El Salvador, and Mexico. We're based in our team, we have an office in Mexico City, and we have a US team that's in San Francisco, Atlanta, and some remote folks. So that's a little bit of the high level on just the organization.
Yeah. And, tell us a little bit about your story. We both share
Yeah.
the passion for ending homelessness for people, but, not
Yeah.
everyone shares that passion. It's kind of a unique space to be in. How did you develop a passion and vision for this?
Honestly, it was the last thing I thought I'd be doing. I didn't grow up having any type of passion around homelessness or around any type of charity. And I think charity, when I say the word charity, I don't mean like the structural form of an organization as charity, but charity just from a biblical standpoint of just, I mean, wanting to love your neighbor and wanting to really put others before yourself. And so I didn't grow up going on mission trips. I was not really a person of faith growing up at all. It really all changed for me after college. When I was in high school and college, I was always, I think, a pretty ambitious guy, but it was ambition for a lot of the wrong reasons. I call it the 3 Gs. And it wasn't gratitude, God, and generosity. It was girls, gold, and glory. And that was what I was pursuing. And I wanted to be a tech entrepreneur so I could kind of make the most gold and have a lot of self-glory. And I started a for-profit startup right out of college. I went to Florida State University. So nowhere fancy, didn't have any type of, accomplished resume at all before starting News Story. And that first startup taught me a lot about entrepreneurship. I was just fascinated by how you could start something from scratch and grow it and create and design something that would be better and different. And that first startup is actually when I made a total 180 in my life, and I became a follower of Jesus, and it just changed a lot of my values.
What happened? I mean, I got to hear that story. So
yeah, it's cool. What God did was he used something that I was basically idolizing, which was an older, not that old, but like probably in the prime of his career, a CEO and an investor that I looked up to so much and just wanted to be like one day. And I had no idea he was a believer. And I was trying to raise money from him, venture capital money for my first startup. And I ended up tracking him down, and it took probably like 6 months to get on his calendar. And I finally got on his calendar, and I showed up to the meeting, and I have all these like leadership questions written out. I want him to be an investor. I want him to be a mentor. I'm like, this is literally the guy I want to be like when I grow up. During that meeting, I started asking him questions about leadership, and he said he really subscribes to a philosophy of servant leadership. And at this point, I'm like 23 years old. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I kind of heard that before. Like, come on, that's just like, what does that actually mean? Where does that come from? And he's like, well, since you asked, it actually comes from, who I believe to be probably the greatest philosopher and leader of all time. And he's like, Jesus. Like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. and then he goes on to share that his faith was just like the most important thing in his life, and it helped him. Not just what I was looking up to was his career and his prominence there, but most importantly, as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as a man of integrity, and just how he treated me. And so that was just kind of the spark that just really changed my mindset, because it was so counter to what I had falsely conditioned my mind to think, that faith was all about rules. You can't be ambitious. You can't be adventurous. You can't have fun. You can't do a lot of things. There's so much judgment. Like, it just wasn't that attractive to me from some of the ways that I was exposed to it growing up. And then this gentleman just like completely shattered all of those objections that I had, and that opened my mind. And then, about 9 months after that, I went all in, made a total 180, total change. And that was about 8 years ago. So yeah, with that change, with the first startup, we wanted to start giving back a little bit of the money we were making, which was not much at all, to charities, because I wanted to start being compassionate and generous, because that's something that Jesus talks about quite a bit. And one of those charities was out of New York, a charity that I'm sure most of the listeners know, Charity Water. And I got to meet Scott and Vic Harrison through that. And they've since become advisors and on our board and friends and mentors. And the other charity was in Haiti. And I went down to Haiti to see that charity in person. And on that trip, there's a long way of answering your question.
Yeah.
That's when I was exposed to the problem of, kids and families not having adequate housing, because there was an earthquake that happened there in 2010. Like literally, no exaggeration, like hundreds of thousands of homes were destroyed, and people were just given temporary tents. And that was about 12 years ago. 12 years later, there's still tens of thousands of people living in those tents. And so that's how I saw the problem. It just kind of broke my heart to see it. And then there's a heart piece of it, and there was just like the head piece as well, and the intellectual piece, which I'm sure, given your passion on this topic, it's like, man, if you don't have the freaking Maslow's hierarchy, life basic human needs, it doesn't matter how creative you are, how intelligent you are, it's just like first principles is when you can't sleep at night, like good luck trying to, stay in school. And how do you get a microloan when you're living in a place that isn't secure, isn't safe? And if there's a storm that comes, like, it's a disaster, and it's just, that all clicked for me of like, whoa, this is such a foundational problem. As you know, it's an insanely challenging and expensive and complex problem,
yes.
But it's one that can help with so many other parts of people's lives if you can get at creating a solution for it. So that's how I came about the problem. And, we started in the summer of 2015, became one of the first nonprofits to go through a for-profit startup accelerator out of Silicon Valley called Combinator. And that's how we kind of got a lot of our roots.
Wow. That's an incredible story. Can you just talk about, you mentioned it, but what does having a home do for someone? I think you guys lay this out very, very nicely on your website, but yeah.
Yeah. The beginning of it is when you don't have a home, your mind, physically and psychologically, you're really just trying to think about surviving, right? You're just trying to think about the next day. You're just trying to think about how to barely make ends meet, what if a storm comes tonight? There's some flooding. So that means there's going to be mosquitoes and my kids are going to get sick. Like you're just thinking about surviving. And when that's your state of mind, and also that affects you obviously physically as well, I think it's very hard. I don't want to use the word impossible, but it's really, really hard to be who God made you to be from a sense of having an imagination, being able to dream, being able to step into things that He's created you to do uniquely, or passions that you have, intelligence, creativity. It's really hard to do that when you're just living in this survival mentality. And we've seen when that changes, of course, there's still a ton of problems, and it doesn't solve everything, and not everything's perfect by any means. But it allows you to, I think, become more of, it kind of sounds cliche, but I think it does give you a chance to become more of who God made you to be, because you get to hopefully live out more of your potential and more of what your mind is kind of telling you to do.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We see the same thing here in America, here in Pittsburgh as well.
Yeah, totally.
Talk about the homes. I mean, this blows my mind how you guys actually create the homes, but how do you build them? What do they cost? And, how could people get involved with building these homes?
Yeah. So our homes they range anywhere probably on the really high end, really high end. Probably people's kitchens cost more than this, but the really high end would be around $12,000 for a multi-generational house that's built to last and built to withstand hurricanes and earthquakes and landslides. And then on the low end is as low as $6,000. Wow. So it just depends on where is it. We use all local labor and all local material, and we hire for-profit construction companies that we work with. So it just depends on the range, and size-wise, they're anywhere from 500 to almost 800 square feet. So we're how we build them. The design, we're agnostic with our design. Like everything from a really shiny, sexy example of 3D printing houses, which we've been able to do with our partner Icon. We just created the world's first 3D printed community down in Mexico, and it's cool and it's exciting. And like literally yesterday, it was on the cover of the New York Times business section, and that was a cool moment, of course, like for us. But like we do a lot of other methods, and what we care about is a low cost home that is high quality. And so there's different architecture methods that don't require any design. Any technology. Is just being thoughtful and creative with the design. So we're always looking for good designs if you want to send them our way.
Yeah. And how do you identify the families? How do you identify who needs a home? How do you identify where you can build? I'm just curious what that process looks like.
We've been at it for 6 years now, so we have a lot more learnings. Unfortunately, it's I think one of the largest total addressable markets, right? So you can kind of go anywhere and find somebody that is in need of adequate housing. We've tried to focus on certain regions to start. We try to focus on certain income levels and level of need of where families are coming from. And then now, ultimately, just having families really opt in to our process, which we've started to in the last couple of years, requiring families to pay for more of the house. Where in the very, very beginning, it didn't start out that way. And we've shifted more of our model to do that. So the families have to opt in to doing that. And then of course, just logistically, we have to be able to have, the construction teams that can build at a higher volume now. Now we're talking about building, thousands of homes a year, soon to be hopefully, over 10,000 homes a year. So There's a logistical pieces of, finding the places that can do that.
Yeah. Also, I'm in fundraising from a nonprofit perspective. You've adopted what I call the charity water model. I don't know that they were the first, but you have a model where 100% of the donations go to building homes. And that's because you have a segment of donors who actually pay for your development and admin costs, which is incredible. Yeah. So Juana, can you just tell people about that? And I'm just curious how you accomplish that. I mean, again, even for myself, it's like, that would be awesome. So, do people respond well to being asked to pay for development and admin costs? Tell me about it.
Yeah, I think it's like, anything in sales or marketing, right? You got to know who is the right customer for the value proposition that you're offering, right? So if I'm going to, a meeting with an entrepreneur or an investor or another CEO, I know that I can talk to her or him about the importance of investing in an incredible team and to, have runway for the years to come, and to, be able to have an R&D and innovation budget, and to get an office that's going to attract really great talent that could be working other places, because I know my audience, right? I know who I'm talking to. And so that pitch to that person is a lot different than a pitch to somebody else where it's, hey, you have an opportunity to directly change the life of this family or this community. And so we just, we didn't know who we're talking to, and different folks have different aspirations for how they want to get involved philanthropically. I think for us, how we've scaled, but our program, we call it the Builders Program. And now it's about almost 60 families, and they're all in 3-year commitments. And we have about a little above a 90% renewal rate. It's about $100,000 a year is the average commitment. So it's a good little engine we've got going now, but it's all about how are you positioning it and who are you talking to? And, if I'm going to talk to, especially if it's a entrepreneur, an executive, or an investor, I'm going to say, invest in us just like how you would invest in a great startup. And what do? You're going to encourage them to hire excellent talent. You're going to encourage them to go take calculated risk. So why not do that with us? Because that's how we're ultimately going to get a more outsized impact, right? A more outsized result is by investing in some of these things that are on the operational expenses, but that's what leads to all of the output and the impact that we want to make. So the more amazing people I can get on this team, and I can recruit from other places and pay them well, I'm unashamed about that. I think it's like I just think that's a huge mistake that a lot of nonprofits make, is just is trying to really underpay people, because the end result is impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
The end result is how many families are you ultimately able to reach and impact, and I'm pretty obsessed with that. Talent and team is the way to do that. So kind of a long way of answering your question, but that's what's really worked for us. And I think the last thing is, like, when you have a conviction on something, which we do with that model, we're very unashamed about it. It's just like, this is how we roll. This is what we believe. And that attracts a lot of people that think the same way. And they're not hearing that from other nonprofits, because other nonprofits are trying to sound like a lot of other nonprofits. And we kind of share exactly what I just said.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious, going back to whenever you were meeting with the investor who helped, impact your life for Christ. I love that you're having meetings with investors and donors at a young age. I love that you said, I came with my list of leadership questions. I had a mentor when I was 17 or 18. He would bring in leaders from the community and said, take them out to coffee, make your list of questions. And really, that's how I started the podcast. I'm awesome. Just curious, when you have those, you can call them high stake meetings. What have you learned about those meetings? What do you do to prepare for them? What do you do to follow up from them? I'm just curious.
So good. There's one of my favorite quotes is, it's not enough to have the will to win. Everybody has that. It's the will to prepare to win that matters. And I think that was from Bob Knight, a basketball coach. And I've really taken that to heart, especially in my early 20s. I'm 32 now, but I just always thought there's so many things that I don't do well. I'm never like the most smartest guy in the room. Like there's just a lot of things that other people have over me, but I realized I could control my preparation and I could control my effort. And by going above and beyond on some of those things, now that I'm getting a little further into my career, I'm realizing how it's actually rare. And I'm like, wow, how are more people not going above and beyond? And it's really not hard. It's just you get conditioned to the status quo and thinking like, I should follow up like this, or I should only prepare for this. And it's, if you have a meeting that can, not to always get your expectations too high, but that can really be meaningful for whatever you're trying to do. I just think it's such a miss to not be overly prepared and to not have a really thoughtful, follow up and plan. And I just think now that I'm like seeing more of it, so many folks just miss that, and they kind of do what's expected, or not even the minimum, but just kind of what's expected. And that's fine. Like that's okay. But it's hard to stand out when you're just doing what's expected, as opposed to, in a follow up, like sending a really great video as a thank you. Or if you talked about some book or something and they said, oh, I want to try that out. Like, cool, order on Amazon and send it to them with a handwritten note, right? Like just these small little things that, I don't know. I always did that. So yeah.
So good. Any tips for fundraisers out there on making the ask?
I don't know. It just sounds so basic and cliche, but just really understanding what drives them and their interest, crafting your story around that. And then, trying to connect on something that is outside of the mission that you're talking about. I think that's why I've done a decent job of connecting with some of like my peers or other executives or founders, is because yes, we have our mission that I'm like deeply passionate about, but I'm also trying to connect with them about how do you grow an organization? How do you think about culture? How do you, here are the challenges that we're thinking about, and you're trying to connect with people in a level that is friendly, that kind of goes beyond just a transaction. And so any commonalities you can find like that you could be genuinely interested, I think goes a long way in building those relationships.
Yeah, I agree with you. And speaking of, building cultures, leadership, et cetera, I want to dive into your journey there. Talk to us about your leadership journey. You started this organization 6 years ago. It seems like you've built an incredible culture, obviously doing work that's impacting the world. What have you learned about leadership in the past 6 years or even prior for your journey?
I think it probably first starts with being an obsessive learner. That was something that I kind of stumbled into out of college. And I just kind of figured out that you can make the choice to invest a lot of time into learning, and you could learn a lot of things. And leadership is obviously incredibly hard, and you're always growing and learning as a leader. And the more your organization grows, or the more, your department grows, you're always going to have new leadership challenges, right? The things that I'm thinking about today are way different than I was thinking about 4 years ago, and way different than what I'll be thinking about 3 years from now. And I think that what stays the same through that is, am I obsessed with learning about how to get to that next level? And that's through talking with people, that's through books, podcasts, the list goes on. I think being a learning leader that is trying to be as rooted as possible in humility, I'd say it probably starts there. And as you probably know, Doug, by this podcast and so many of your friends, it's hard to find a leader you admire that hasn't done that, that hasn't been just obsessed with the journey of learning. And it's pretty amazing how much you can learn if you're intentional about it, right? And I think as I've gone a little further into this journey, I can see how easy it is to be less intentional about it, right? Because you get off to a decent start, you've got some momentum, people are telling you that things are going well, and I can see how people start to drift a little bit in their hunger and their intentionality and really their obsession with learning, right? So that would probably be my first thing. And after that, I would say have really good people around you that you're learning from, and that you get to have conversations with and build relationships with. And how are they sharpening you? I think for me, and this example is just related to my journey, just by physically being in San Francisco and Silicon Valley during the kind of heyday from 2015 to 2020, I lived there, being surrounded by and my peers that were building these technology startups, it just rubbed off on me. It rubbed off. I saw it. I saw standards they had. I saw things that they were doing that people other places said couldn't be done, or it's not done like that. And that seeped into, how I thought about things. So I had that inspiration. And then of course, for me, as my faith being the most important thing to me, I also had great people that I was trying to learn from there. And I think you just see examples, and that hopefully seeps into your mind and kind of your operating system.
Yeah. So, as being a lifelong learner as you are, you've been at the 6 months. How have you had to specifically grow within those 6 years? Or, you talked about how, hey, year 3, you look back and totally different set of issues and problems. Now you're looking back on, year 3 of the organization. How have you specifically grown, and what's been challenging for you?
Man, what I think about so much more in the last, probably the last 2 years is just talent and recruiting. And I'm still out selling a lot from a fundraising standpoint, but now I'm like, man, the best thing I can do is sell people to come work here,
Come on, yeah.
And that really is some of the highest, it's the highest use of my time is trying to go out and find extraordinary people, to come work here. And that's definitely been a transition and a change. That's been something new, trying to figure out I think the dichotomy of, which has actually been quite hard, probably the last year for me, the dichotomy of creating a culture where you want a lot of feedback. You want people to really speak into things. You want everybody's opinion and advice. You want everybody to be heard, genuinely. And all decisions can't be made by consensus and that way. And you're going to make decisions that, especially as the organization grows and more stakeholders are involved, you're not going to get usually 100% alignment on everything. And I think what's dangerous is if you try to think success is getting 100% alignment on decisions. Because usually if you look back at a lot of the breakthrough decisions that companies have made, the breakthrough decisions are usually very controversial in the beginning, right? They're risky, they're controversial, they require maybe changing certain things that people don't want to change in the moment. And if you're optimizing for more consensus, or more for trying to have everybody be super happy and aligned on something that everybody 100% agrees on, it's really hard to get any type of breakthrough ideas or concepts, because usually being a little contrarian or doing things that have, that the opposition is folks saying, let's not do that, let's think differently, or let's not go in the direction that you're saying. Those are usually the decisions that, end up having huge returns and breakthroughs. So kind of still going through that now, of you want to have a place that, which we do, that is incredibly inclusive and is taking in so much feedback and intel from our team and stakeholders, and you can't make decisions by consensus on everything.
Yeah, it's talking about team, looking over the pictures of your team members on your website, a lot of young people. And I know there's a lot of leaders, especially some older leaders, just saying, hey, how do we lead this next generation? How do we create cultures and workplaces where they actually want to work? What have you learned about leading the next generation? I mean, I know you're a young leader yourself. What do leaders need to know about that?
I think younger folks, and we are maturing our team. So we're trying to do that, and we're bringing on, more senior folks for sure. It's funny, every year our probably median age increases, but yeah, I think there's advantages and disadvantages to, it's big disadvantages to starting something when you're 25, right? And me and my two other co-founders were 25, and we made something that we wanted, right? And it's hard to beat that as an origin, place if you're asking about how do you build something for a millennial.
What did you want? What was the thinking that went into that?
Man, we wanted something that was challenging, that was going to be using technology, that was going to be very forward thinking, that wasn't going to be stuck in traditional ways, that didn't have an older, more traditional board. We wanted a brand that would be exciting and cool. It would inspire people. We wanted great design. Yeah, those are some things that came to mind. And when I looked around, I just didn't see that many places. From my personal opinion, it's not to say that it was right or wrong. It was just my personal opinion. And so I think my advice to some folks listening, I would really try to find, some extraordinary young leaders and elevate their position at the organization and give them a lot of power and autonomy and pay them really well, and really encourage them to go out and attract and try to, the best of their ability, retain great talent. If you're not in the kind of millennial world, or now the Gen Z is coming, and we're trying to figure out how do we recruit a lot of those great folks right out of college, where they could be going and working at Snapchat or in crypto or all these other places that are very interesting and appealing. How do we create a place that is attractive and appealing for them? And so, yeah, I guess my to round it out, I would say, if you want to create a more attractive work environment for high potential millennials that are hungry and have the opportunity to work at a lot of places, you've got to have some awesome younger leaders on your team that they're going to be inspired by, they're going to be attracted to, and that they're going to see an opportunity to really grow and have influence at the organization.
So good. Thank you for sharing. Before we go into the lightning round, I read on your
Yeah.
your bio, you're also a cancer survivor. I haven't heard a lot about that. Is that true? And then can you just talk to us about that journey and how that's shaped who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I was 18 when I got diagnosed with a really rare form of cancer, completely out of nowhere. It was my senior year in high school. Wanted to go play college basketball, and it just happened out of nowhere. And so it was a pretty serious tumor. I had about a third of a chance that I wasn't going to make it. And turned out I was okay. I was fine. Had like a nearly perfect surgeries, and yeah, God just really, I got lucky and blessed me. Yeah, I think what it did was the main thing it taught me was that you're just, as much as we want to be in control, we're not in control. And whether that's a disease hitting or, even worse, somebody, that is here today and is gone the next week, like we're not God and we're not in control. We never think it can happen to us until it happens, and so I think that was a learning for me that there are going to be things that happen that I wasn't planning on, that I don't like, but I can't control that. Obviously I can set up healthy systems and habits in my life that are trying to put me in the best position to be healthy and to live a longer, healthy life that's honoring God. But who knows? I mean, you never know what can happen. And so I think it's what I learned is just a cliche kind of quote, but like, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And I really do believe that. And I think that, we're in charge of our attitudes, and we can actually, there's not many things we can control, obviously, in life. I think what we can control is our attitudes, and we can control our effort. And so that just taught me I am in charge of my attitude.
Thank you for sharing your journey with us. I want to dive into the lightning round, just a bunch of fun questions I always ask leaders on the podcast with the time we have left. And the first one is, what is the best advice you've ever received and who gave it to you?
I would say probably in the beginning of my entrepreneurial career, there was someone that told me, you're going to have a choice to do the easy thing or the hard thing. And the more you can choose to do the hard thing, the more basically the more return you're going to get out of things. And I think as I've gotten a little older now, I realize every single choice that you make in life, you don't want to choose the hardest thing. But just from philosophically, like if I wake up in the morning and I say I want to run 5 days a week, and it's like, it'd be so much easier just to stay in bed. Well, then you ask the question, like, what's easier, what's harder? And if you can continue to choose the harder thing, that's obviously how you're getting growth. Now, of course, you can go overboard with that. And I've had my own journey of going a little overboard with that. But that was something that I think really helped shape me from like 24 to where I'm at now, age 32.
If you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
Dream big, aim high.
Best purchase you've made in the last year for $100 or less?
Gosh, everything I like is a little more than 100. But yeah, my AirPods, my little watch, it's like 200.
AirPods are the number one answer. Everyone always goes over. It's funny.
Yeah, I'd say like just as far as value wise, they're pretty hard to beat. So I'll go with that.
I agree with you. Top 3 books that have impacted your life.
Extreme Ownership by a former Navy SEAL, kind of leadership guy. Jocko was just incredible. The Return of the Prodigal Son is probably the book that's had the biggest spiritual impact on my life. And then it's more of a story, and it's manifested in a book, but it really has shaped a lot of my life. And that's Thirst by Scott Harrison. Scott's story and what they've done had a significant impact on me as inspiration. And I just think it's an incredible, inspiring story.
Biggest leadership pet peeve?
People saying they're going to do something and they don't do it.
Greatest leadership challenge right now?
Trying to be maniacally focused when there are seemingly very exciting, interesting things that you should be saying no to like 9 out of 10 times. And I think the challenge is you want to be maniacally focused. We're trying to be as focused as we could ever be. And you don't want to shut out absolutely everything. And so it's the judgment of, if you're going to try something that's a little off course, you better have a lot of conviction on that thing. I think that's hard. There's not the perfect answer to that. It's more of a gut. It's more of a judgment thing. Yeah. So that would probably be the current challenge.
Yeah, you get to spend time with a lot of great leaders. It sounds like you've been doing learning lunches or learning times with leaders for a long time. Do you have a go-to question that you always ask no matter what leader you're meeting with?
Yeah, it'll depend on what I'm kind of most focused on for my role. So if it's in, like right now, I'm thinking a lot about recruiting. So if that's like what's kind of at the top of my priority list for a season, then I would go pretty deep into asking them questions about how they recruited some of their best people, stories, and try to learn from those stories.
I'm just curious, what's something that you've done that you think everyone else should do? Maybe something you've crossed off your bucket list, et cetera.
Oh gosh, before even starting News Story, I tried to do some public speaking, and I started just speaking to very small youth groups. I think it was like 20 people. And I think that's something that really helps people, because at the time I didn't know I was going to start News Story. I didn't know that I would eventually be doing, a lot of speaking, but that fear, which I was very fearful, and I was not confident, and it was so bad. If you watch like probably the first like 20 attempts, but just whatever that is, whether it's speaking or something else that you're pretty fearful of, but you could start. Man, this is not an exciting bucket list answer, but like if you could just start by saying, what's a very low risk thing of like talking to a youth group, right, as an example, or like whatever that thing is, like what could you do that the stakes are pretty low, but it's giving you a chance to go out and learn a skill that you think will be valuable for you personally and professionally, and then just doing it. The first thing that actually came to mind when you said the billboard question, which I couldn't say because it's Nike's slogan, but it's just do it. It's just like, gosh, I think people just spend, and this is just not me. I think it's a gift. Like, I'm much more simple-minded. I think some folks just spend so long researching and this and that, and like, just do it.
Come on.
If I would have waited around and did all this research of what's the perfect strategy for a new housing organization and how does that fit into the whole ecosystem, like, I don't know. I was like, let's just try to do like 10 houses to start, and like, let's just do it this way. And is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. Are we going to make mistakes? Absolutely. But like, just do it. Just get started. And I don't think enough people do that.
All right. How can people connect with you and everything you're doing? Whether they want to work for you, it looks like you're hiring, so you're always looking great talent. If anyone's listening to this and people want to donate and build a house, how can they find you?
I'm personally recruiting for a CFO. So that's a shameless plug. If anybody wants to come in as a entrepreneurial finance and operations leader, we got a really exciting gig there. But if not, our website is newstorycharity.org. You can learn about everything we're doing if you want to get involved, philanthropically or to join our team. So, and then I'm mostly active on Twitter, and my handle is just my name. It's @BrettHagler.
Great. Well, Brett, this was a fantastic conversation. Thanks for everything you're doing in the world. It makes a huge difference, and it was an honor to get to know you a little bit better. Same, man. I appreciate it. This is fun. Thank you. Well, hey, leader, thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Brett. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can find ways to connect with him and links to everything that we discussed in the show notes at l3leadership.org/296. And leader, I really want to challenge you that if you really want to 10x your growth this upcoming year, then you need to either launch or join an L3 Leadership Mastermind Group. Mastermind groups are simply groups of 6 to 12 leaders that meet together for at least 1 year in order to help each other grow, achieve their goals, and to do life together. If you're interested in learning more about mastermind groups, go to l3leadership.org/masterminds. And as always, I like to end every episode with a quote, and I'll quote John Maxwell. He said this recently. I love this. He said, "Here are the questions that you should ask about the people you have surrounding you. Do they believe in me? Do they have my interest at heart? Can they help me? And if they help me, will it change them? Well, hey, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it inspired you. I hope it challenged you. And more than anything, I want you to know that Laura and I love you. We believe in you. Don't quit. Keep leading. Keep making a difference. The world needs your leadership. We'll talk to you next episode.